It occurred to me that 4 years into the channel, and I still haven't covered a classic exploitation film. I mean, I've covered plenty of classics in the exploitation world, but not a classic. By this, I mean an independent film produced well outside the code system in one of the classic exploitation genres before 1959. Why 1959? Well, there are a few reasons for that cutoff, but one of them, and maybe the most important one for us, is that's the year Russ Meyer released the first Nudie Cutie, The Immoral Mr. Tease, and changed the landscape of exploitation cinema forever. Before the modern Nudie Cutie, the classic exploitation genres included the sex hygiene film, the nudist camp film, the stripper and burlesque film, the vice and crime film, the exotic film, and what we might call the shocker. Maniac is a shocker. Welcome to Exploitation Reviews, and me, Rap, and today I'm taking a look at the infamous Maniac from 1934. This won't be a review, because this film, like the other classic exploitation films, they were never intended to be good. In fact, they aren't good, because they didn't have to be. These films are best thought of as carnival sideshow attractions rather than films. They're made to titillate and to shock and to show the audiences things that Hollywood never would. If the audience left the theater and one of them told a passerby, "Man, you would not believe what I just saw in there," the film was a success. Anyway, if you'd like to know more about this period of exploitation cinema, you can read this book. But before that, let's see if Maniac delivered on its promise to shock you. We open with a square-up. In classic exploitation, it was very common to start with a text crawl like this one, or even an introduction that tried to put the film on the right side of the morality of the day. This was an attempt to make the censors happy. Basically, a square-up would go, "This is a terrible moral problem that America faces, and we, the filmmakers, feel it's important that audiences know about it so they can be aware and stop it." And then the filmmakers would go on to show all of those terribly immoral things like white slavery, or cheating on your spouse, or using drugs, and so on. Anyway, as a little throwback, maybe even a little joke, Ilsa, she-wolf of the SS, also starts with a square-up. Even though there was no reason to have one, because in 1975 there were no longer any censor boards. Anyway, once our film gets started, a doctor and his assistant talk about their experiments, bringing dead tissue back to life. Sounds a bit like Victor Frankenstein, or, in this case, maybe Herbert West. The pair, one of whom disguises himself as the coroner, go to the morgue and find a suitable, patient. They inject her with something and rub her, presumably to work that serum through her dead veins. The next day, employees of the morgue are surprised one of their bodies has disappeared, and are even more surprised they were tricked by the imposter. His disguise was flawless. Back with the doctor, he says the girl will wake up in 24 hours, and for his next experiment, he wants a new corpse to experiment on. The assistant goes out to get one, but is scared away by various fighting cats and dogs. I guess it's kind of hard to tell exactly what went wrong. But the doctor is nonetheless displeased. But he says it's not too late. He tells his assistant to shoot himself so he can return life to his body. The assistant, smartly, does not do that. Instead, he turns the gun on the doctor. Pretty smart. And then, since he's a master of disguise, he disguises himself as that doctor. And this transformation is pretty cool. He's not a very good doctor, though. He injects his first patient with some super adrenaline, and that doesn't go well. The patient turns into a kind of crazed zombie and kidnaps the now reanimated girl. He does stop along the way to rip her clothes off, though, so he's not a brainless zombie. The wife of that patient finds the dead doctor, but instead of turning the imposter in, she tells him he should kill her husband and bring him back as her slave. So, yeah, she's a pillar of the community. Anyway, in one of the film's more infamous scenes, the imposter pokes out a cat's eye, and then he eats it.
Why? It's not unlike an oyster or a grape.
And then he hides the doctor's body behind a wall. But he gets distracted by this vision of demons or something, and while he's distracted, a black cat hops into the hole where the doctor's body is. And if that sounds familiar, it's because this film is a loose adaptation of the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Black Cat, with a few references to murders of the Rue Morgue thrown in for good measure. Anyway, over in a hotel room, some scantily clad women are hanging out. Why? Well, if you need to know the answer to that question, you're watching the wrong kind of movie. One of these women is the wife of the guy who is impersonating the doctor. She learns that he has recently inherited a large sum of money, so it's time to reconnect with him and leave these scantily clad friends behind. The impersonator, still disguised as the doctor, immediately sees what she's up to and puts a different plan into motion. He pits his wife against the wife of the man he earlier zombified. They fight in the cellar near where the original doctor is walled up. Upstairs, the imposter laughs manically. The doctor's neighbor hears the commotion and calls the cops. That neighbor, by the way, is a guy who owns a cat breeding farm where he sells their fur, and that is a whole other side story of crazy.
The rats eat the cat. The cats eat the rat, and I get the skins. Well, rats eating cats? Well, that is news.
So the coppers show up and separate the two fighting ladies and hear the cat behind the wall, and that's pretty much the film. So what do we think about this thing? Well, unlike plenty of reviews of the time and later and even today here on YouTube, I don't think we should talk about this film in terms of being good or bad. That was never the intention. This is a particular kind of entertainment very similar to going to a carnival freak show, and I don't think we would assess those as being good or bad. Honey, how was the show? Good, so good. I tell you, darling, they had these Siamese ladies and they kissed each other. And there was a man with his heart on the outside and he ate a wine glass after biting the head off a chicken. It was wonderful, darling. The performances were so good. See, that's weird, right? Good, bad, not really the point. Wild, crazy, shocking, gross, these are the goals. A movie like Maniac should be assessed as spectacle, not film. And as a spectacle, I'm sure the audiences of 1934 were well pleased. They got a crazed zombie man ripping off a woman's top, some cool demon imagery, some ladies hanging out in a hotel in lingerie, a cat farmer. Oh, and speaking of cats, there's that cat who gets his eye poked out and eaten. What more do you want?